We come in with this Fox News alert, new reaction from the president after a federal jury found his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, guilty on 8 counts of the 18 on bank fraud and tax fraud, with a mistrial declared on those other 10. Manafort could face a maximum of 80 years in prison. His sentencing is scheduled for a week from today. President Trump reiterated Manafort and the case brought by Robert Mueller have nothing to do with Manafort's work for the campaign. Watch it.
Paul Manafort's a good man. He was with Ronald Reagan. He was with a lot of different people over the years, and I feel very sad about that. It doesn't involve me, but I still feel, it's a very sad thing that happens. This has nothing to do with Russian collusion. This started as Russian collusion. This has absolutely nothing to do. This is a witch hunt, and it's a disgrace.
Meanwhile, yesterday, as the president headed to political rally in West Virginia, top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer warned the president against any pardons of Manafort or his former attorney, Michael Cohen.
I understand the president's on his way to a rally. He better not talk about pardons for Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort tonight or any time in the future.
He better not. Oh. That sounded like he could do something about that. Andy, in all of this with Paul Manafort, even the judge in the case, T.S. Ellis, said, we aren't going to discuss Russian collusion. It is not part of this case. Why hammer that point now if you're the president and legal team? What are they trying to accomplish that the judge already didn't accomplish for them?
I really don't know. I think it's a mistake to keep hammering this because I really think if you look objectively at what's happened here, I really don't think Mueller is trying to make a collusion case against the president. I think Mueller is pursuing his original objective, which is Russia's interference in the election, of which the collusion thing was one strand. And my view of it is he's interested in Manafort because of Manafort, not because of Trump and collusion. And the reason I say that is he's had Gates as a cooperator for 6 months. There's nothing that Manafort knows about Trump and Russia that Gates doesn't know. And yet what has happened since Gates been a cooperator? He's brought 2 indictments against groups of Russians that don't even hint that there was any collusion. In fact, reading the indictments suggests exactly the opposite, that the Russians were doing their own thing, right?
Yeah. You mentioned some Americans in the last indictment, including a congressional candidate.
Marie, it's not the way you would tee it up. If you thought that you were like on the verge of breaking a big case of Trump and Russia, that is not the way that it would be done. So I think he's making a big mistake continually attacking Mueller because he's sort of begging for Mueller to write a report that's going to be scathing, and just to defend himself.
And it just doesn't look like that from the outside, that's where he's headed.
I don't think so.
Well, does it also accomplish, if the president is silent about it at this point, if these people in his constellation, Cohen, Manafort, and Lisa mentioned a wider scope, Chris Collins in New York. And,
Flynn, Papadopoulos.
But you were saying in terms of Republicans, but I'm saying in terms of the president, because Collins and Duncan Hunter, in that order, were the first sitting members of Congress to endorse the president. So they are in the constellation of conversation that we're talking about. But if it really has nothing to do with Mueller's investigation, why even bring it up?
Well, yeah, I don't mean to suggest that I don't think Mueller is interested in Trump at all, because I think as to Trump, it's an obstruction investigation, not a collusion investigation.
Then the new tweet, the new narrative that you may have picked up, it has nothing to do with me,
right?
Is what the president says. And that, you would say, would be better nomenclature, better narrative.
It would certainly be better than a full frontal assault on the prosecutor, who up until this point has not even hinted in anything public that Trump is involved in a corrupt way with Russia.
But you've said that this is largely political for the president facing impeachment charges as opposed to actually a legal liability. So it does make sense for President Trump to wage this PR battle against Mueller, because this is a political fight. This is a PR fight. And that's what President Trump is doing. And we've seen public polling's been different, but we have seen it going, in different directions and people. And so I think pointing to the Manafort case, what President Trump can say and what Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted out last night, this has nothing to do with collusion. This has nothing to do with what Mueller was originally charged with. So I actually think President Trump is being smart from a PR standpoint and a political standpoint.
Let me just push
maybe
back
not from, you putting your lawyer hat on.
I would push back just in this sense. I agree with you that he's done a public relations strategy because he's thinking about impeachment, which is about public opinion. It's not about what happens in court. But I think you have to play out the whole chess game. And whatever the polls look like now, the last word on this is going to be Mueller's report.
That's right.
But wouldn't it be wrong for him to be swayed emotionally in devising his report?
We talked about this once before. I'm not saying that you say anything in the report that's untrue. But you can write a report, or you can write a report.
It sounds like spin to me.
So
it's not spin. It's how compellingly, aggressively you argue the facts.
It's also worth remembering that the next Manafort trial that will be happening in D.C. is in a large part about Manafort's work with this pro-Russian, pro-Putin Ukrainian politician and party. So we don't know, and there are people that have thought that
a very dirty former president of Ukraine politically.
That was closely aligned with President Putin and with Russia. And so the
Is that the guy that Christopher Steele was also working on behalf, it looked like?
No, it's not. Former President Yanukovych? No.
there is another guy that Christopher Steele was
I'm talking about Yanukovych.
Oleg
the person that Paul Manafort was lobbying for didn't report that. And there are people who have said that when Paul Manafort was running the campaign, the platform of the campaign became much more pro-Russian, much less pro-Ukrainian. So I think that these issues are going to come up in the next trial.
We've already learned, even from this past trial, just in terms of that $58 or so million, that's where some of the money was coming from, because he was doing work for that former president.
Well,
so
I'll be interested to see if the trial happens, though. You know, I mean,
now why do you think a second? Because this is now the second time I've heard this. So why do you think that a second trial wouldn't happen?
Well, if we all are right that what Mueller is trying to accomplish is to squeeze Manafort, it looks to me like he's got him on 80 years of criminal exposure. Right. He's got this D.C. case.
You don't think he'll appeal it? Because his attorneys are saying he's going over his options now.
He can appeal it, but look, that judge put these prosecutors through the paces of all paces.
Yeah, you're not going to get a friendlier judge.
So, and then he's got the D.C. case is a home game for Mueller, which Manafort would have to be concerned about. I'm sure he was happy that the Eastern District of Virginia case was first. And then it's not like Manafort got acquitted yesterday. He's got 10 more counts in his pocket that he could retry if he wants to.
He could definitely be squeezed. And it boggles my mind a little bit when people say the Manafort thing has nothing to do with Russia, because that's where the money originally came from, and that's who he was working with originally. So that's just, it's kind of like that's what it all goes back to. And you see through there how he could have become vulnerable. The question is then, what did he do from there, and what did the president know about it, if anything?
Exactly.
Right?
And I want to make sure we heard you correctly. So the second trial might not happen. So what happens in its place?
Well, maybe he decides to plead guilty and cooperate with Mueller, which is what this has been about all along. Yeah. The other thing is, if he's thinking of a pardon, I think if I were thinking of a pardon, the last thing I would want is my misconduct to be played out in the second trial and make the record worse.
Yeah. Lanny Davis says that Michael Cohen, his client, wouldn't take a pardon. I don't know where Paul Manafort is in that.
I don't think I believe that.
But that's the dumbest thing to say.
That story broke at the same time that his sentencing has been put on hold. And the reporting was it's likely because he may be ready to cooperate, too. So you've got Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, a couple of Michaels, and Paul Manafort.
Yeah,
only the best people.
I think Flynn's sentencing has been put off because if Mueller agreed to sentence Flynn at this point, it would signal that his investigation is over, which it's not.
Yeah, and that's what the paperwork said.
Yeah.
It said that we're not ready yet because we're not ready with. Okay,
interesting.
Great. Wow, so much.